Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Inside ND Sports Podcast. I'm Tyler James, and I'm joined once again by the one and only Eric Hansen. Together, we cover Notre Dame football, recruiting, and more for InsideNDSports.com on the Rivals Network. Eric, we are almost there. Kickoff is just around the corner for Notre Dame's season opener at Texas A&M. There's been plenty of talk about Notre Dame's offensive line this week, and we'll likely get into more about that later. But one of the storylines of the entire offseason for Notre Dame has been the wide receiver position. So why not bring on a guest who knows quite a bit about making some big-time catches at Notre Dame? Michael Floyd remains Notre Dame's career leader in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdown receptions. And today he's on the Inside ND Sports Podcast. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tyler. I appreciate it, buddy.
Michael, I mentioned the offensive line in my intro, and Notre Dame's going to have a true freshman starting at left tackle in his first career game. So I was curious, what do you remember about your first career game at Notre Dame, and how did you manage the nerves and emotions that come with that?
It's crazy. I didn't even start when I first got there, but a good friend of mine, David Grimes, got injured, like at, I don't know, the 50-yard line, and I just got in, and the first play was a go ball down the right-hand side, and Jimmy threw it to me, and I caught it for, like, I don't know, 50, 60-yard touchdown. So that kind of let all the goosebumps and the nerves go away, and it kind of set sail from there.
And Michael, you still have the freshman record by a mile. I mean, that's not even close in terms of catches as a freshman at Notre Dame. I mean, besides the fact that Charlie was a pretty good offensive mind and Jimmy was a really good quarterback, what do you feel like helped you maintain that success as a freshman to be so successful and be so camera ready as a young man?
I don't know. I think it was just ingrained in me to just, work hard. And I also had some upperclassmen that kind of helped me out throughout the way. I mean, Jimmy has been a great friend since I came on campus and continues to be a great friend now. But I just knew that, the level of, expertise or demanding of what he wanted from his wide receivers was, he expected a lot out of us. And when you have guys that kind of have the same kind of goals around you, it just kind of moves the energy around and it keeps things, the expectations really high. So I was actually glad that I was just being around guys who's had experience.
And Michael, how do you develop chemistry with a quarterback quickly? What are the keys to making sure that even if it's someone you haven't played with prior to this season, how do you make sure that you guys are on the same page?
So Tyler, that brings me up to a great question people always ask me is like, what do you do like in the off seasons, or how do you make it to the pros? And I tell people to build that chemistry with your quarterback or with other wide receivers or just teammates in general is you guys got to get together. So like, I never had a spring break, never went on a spring break, never did. I always went to go and train. And then in the summertime, I came home and trained and worked on my craft to get better because I wanted to get back to campus and be the best wide receiver there and put up, a winning record. So the mindset was just, try to be the best that I can and create that chemistry and friendship with Jimmy or whoever the quarterback was to making sure that was good.
For our listeners, Michael has a pretty busy life. He has a real estate business. He has 3 kids, Sienna, Michael Jr., and Liv. If I'm not mistaken, your wife, Sydney, was thinking about going to law school or is in law school. Is she in law school?
She is thinking about it still, not really thinking about it. That's what she wants to do.
Okay.
So I am 100% on board on what she wants to do. We always get to talking and conversations about, life is going to change. And I'm like, that's totally fine. Whatever you're passionate about, to go in through it 100% and give it a all. And, let's just see what the outcome goes.
Well, having said all that, it doesn't leave you a lot of time to be a big football fan. So I'm just wondering, what have you pulled in from the preseason kind of on-ramp for Notre Dame's 2024 season. What have you gleaned about the team? What are you excited about in terms of this season?
I'm excited that we're starting off Saturday with in a big game. I think that will show a lot of where we are competitive wise and where we should be and what we need to work on. It's always good to start off at a with a competitive team just to see where you are as a team. I think Coach Freeman will have them guys ready to go, but I think this is a big test for the Notre Dame team, and I think with the W here, it only shows what the season can be like.
And Michael, during your time at Notre Dame, what was the loudest environment you played in, and what's the biggest challenge? Is it really that intimidating, or is it more the communication piece? So first of all, what was the loudest, and then what's the biggest challenge?
I would say, I mean, every time we went up to Michigan, it was crazy. And there were always games. I feel like we lost like 10 games within the last, I don't know, minute of a game. Like certain these seasons, if you win them, last minute of in the fourth quarter, our seasons could have been totally different. But obviously it went how it did. And you know, I would say I forget your last question, what you wanted me to
What
ask.
was the challenge? Like, was it the intimidation factor, or was it communicating that was more of a challenge?
I would say communicating. It's very tough, and that's you don't really you want to get on board. They do a lot of that in the NFL, but I think Coach Weis, being in the NFL, had us for the most part ready for what to expect. Loud music at practice. Uh, he always played Bon Jovi. That was his favorite person to play. So that's all we're listening to. But he got us ready for the games. But I would say communication is key, especially going down in Texas A&M, where I know that crowd and that environment will be ready to go.
Mike Denbrock was the tight ends coach in your final two seasons at Notre Dame. What has it been like to see his rise as an offensive coordinator in college football?
First of all, I want to say, man, congratulations to him, and also he was a hell of a coach and a great human being. When I was there with him, he always treated all the players with respect. So I have nothing but respect for him. But just to see a coach come from being a tight ends coach and then going through the kind of levels of coaching and now being an offensive coordinator, it's just exciting to see. I know he has an offensive mind, and I know that he doesn't. His standards are not low. They're all his expectations of his players are going to be high, and I'm just excited to see what the offense can do this year.
Michael, I saw, I think, an article the other day. You speak to sometimes younger players and so forth, and so you're still very connected with football. How much of that, when you do that, do you share about the bumps in the road in your journey? How much is that a part of your message?
I usually bring that on, the last 25%, because everyone sees, oh, he played 8 years in the NFL, won a Super Bowl ring, all this, glory, glory, glory. But really, it's not like that. And everyone has, bumps in the way. But it's how you, you know, get over them humps and, having certain people around you to get you through, some tough times is great. When adversity hits, how do you respond? And I feel like I responded, really well. And I always tell my story, and I tell everybody, if you ever want me to come to a school and talk, I'm all open arms because like everyone needs to hear it. Not everything is, out to how it seems. So when they hear the reality and life of a certain individual like myself, they're like, oh, some people might be able to relate, but then some people also understand, not everything's, the best every single day, so it's always I like when people get to hear my story. They get to hear a real life story and situation.
Michael, how much have those lessons sort of shaped who you've become now and who you are in your everyday life today?
I think it's shaped out a lot of me growing up as a man, and as a father, because I think them certain things while growing up wasn't taught to me. So through my mistakes, I'm able to, when that time, sit down with my own kids and tell them, my story and how you can eliminate certain situations, to put yourself in good shape. So I kind of use my own story as to helping my own family. And my wife, Cindy, is really a big supporter of me, my sobriety, and she's kudos out to her. She's one of the best and the best, and she helps me out a lot.
I'm curious, Michael, and I remember talking to you a little over a year ago, and you talked about how close you still were with some of your teammates, and I think you brought up Jimmy and Golden and Kyle Rudolph and so forth. Were they part of your journey back? Were they part of your journey toward where you are now?
I did a congratulations, and there's nothing ever forced, and they're just happy for me, that I chose the route that I did, and everyone, I don't mind, I go and hang out with them whenever I can, and if they go and have a drink, I like to have fun. That's great on them, but I'm still there. I'm still the same person. I love to have fun. It's just without any alcohol, but I'm still the same funny, energetic guy that everyone knows. So it's nothing really changes.
Do you still keep in touch with Charlie, and have you seen him with his triple digit weight loss?
I have not in a while, but that's exciting. I heard about that too, and that's just amazing. And I'm very, very, very happy for Coach Weis.
Michael, speaking of Coach Weis, I was curious, getting back to football, what was the most difficult part about the transition of offenses between Charlie Weis and Brian Kelly?
Huddling, pro style offense. It was straight for the NFL. I think the NFL now is kind of getting to what Coach Kelly was teaching us at the time, because that's just how the way the NFL goes. But I'm happy that I got both offenses experiences, because it really helped me develop as a player and making sure that if I do leave a team, I know certain offenses already to get me ahead of other people, to making sure I'm prepared every single day.
Michael, you've transitioned into real estate. Tell us why you chose real estate, how people can learn more about your business, and how did Notre Dame help you prepare for that?
Yeah, so I'm a real estate agent with EXP Realty, and this is going on almost 2 years. I chose real estate just because I think it's another way for me to help people out. There's a lot of people out here that, as real estate agents, they charge a certain commission, and regardless of what financial situation you're in. But I've been blessed to, this is my second career, so I'm able to help people in any way possible, to making sure that they, stay in the positive and not in the negative when they go to the closing table. And I would just say also too, if there's anyone out there not in Minnesota that's looking for a real estate agent, I can help you. Even if you don't live in Minnesota, I would connect anyone with the best realtor in that city.
Michael, how do people get in touch with you, or how do they, what's your website where they can kind of get more information?
Follow me on Instagram or Facebook. I'm super active in the social media game. My email, michaelmatthewfloyd@gmail.com. 1T. I still to this day ask my mom why she only put 1T. Never got uh, an answer, a good answer. But yeah, that's it. You can reach me anytime. I always get mail all the time too. So if you maybe might be slow to get back to you, but the mail is coming out. It's coming back to you for sure. My wife sits me down probably like every other Sunday, and I sign out for people. So
If I remember right, your mom like worked at the Mall of America. Maybe she didn't have enough time to put that extra T in there because she seemed awfully busy when you were playing.
she was busy, and she's done a lot. I retired her about 6 7 years ago. She lives 10 minutes down the street from me, so it's good to keep family close, and especially you know parents now at my age are getting older. So the fact that I can drive over there anytime I want and go and see her, puts a smile on my face.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Michael. That's all we have for you. We really appreciate you taking time to talk to us today.
Hey, Tyler, anytime, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Before we get to our question segment, I wanted to remind our listeners of our long-standing subscription promo for InsideNDSports.com. We're offering a 30-day free trial to our podcast listeners who want to try out a subscription to the site. That will get you access to all of our premium football analysis, our recruiting coverage, and the Insider Lounge message board where you don't have to wait for the next podcast to ask us a question. You can take advantage of this offer by using promo code NDPOD. That's NDPOD when you sign up for a subscription on InsideNDSports.com. You can also find a link to the deal in the podcast description or show notes. I also wanted to take a moment to remind you about our new partner, Autograph. You can now find Inside ND Sports content on the Autograph app, which is free to download on Android and iOS devices. The company, co-founded by Tom Brady, believes that devotion should be rewarded and the future of fandom belongs to the fans. There are many cool tools and features in the app, including the daily replay, which summarizes the news from the previous day with links to content you may have missed. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can download the app using the QR code at the bottom of the screen or by using the link listed in the video or podcast description. From there, go find our content in the Notre Dame community. Make sure you use the referral code INDS so Autograph knows we sent you. All right, now it's time for questions. You can submit questions to us on Twitter or the Insider Lounge message board before every podcast. I'm at TJamesND and Eric's at EHansenND. First one I have for us, Eric, is from LDL Go Irish on the Insider Lounge. The game has become more and more about the coaches. First games are tricky and very often are followed with changes as the coaches see what they have under game conditions. Is Notre Dame ready for a big game on the road? Did the coaches get the O-line right? How is the game plan? How well will the coaches make adjustments? With your combined powers of seeing the future, predict come Sunday what will you expect to be the best that the coaches accomplished, where the fewest changes will be needed, and the worst that they accomplish where ND will need the most changes.
So LDL Go Irish, I commend you. We are allowed basically two questions in our press conferences, and I try to weasel my way in getting multi-part questions to make it more than two questions. And you've done that really well here, but we're going to break these down into parts. So let's start with the first part of your question, which is ND ready for a big game on the road? And the thing is, I mean, it's really hard to predict that. We'll find out. But I think mentally and physically, they really invested in this, having the right mindset, getting the communication piece right. You know, before I answered the question, I went back and watched the Virginia Tech Open from 2018 when Metallica was on the video board and they played Enter Sandman, and the game turned out to be more like Mr. Sandman. Notre Dame was ranked number 6, and ESPN, it's the cauldron of chaos. And Notre Dame won that game 45-23. And I'm not saying that is what's going to happen in this game, but you learn from the past. And if you're going to be a playoff team, if you want to think of yourself as a national contender, then there's rites of passage you have to pass through, and you should embrace those. And I think this team is. So from that standpoint, I do think they're ready.
Yeah, I would be surprised if they come out of the game and say, man, we didn't prepare them for the road environment. I think there's too many veteran coaches on the staff to have not figured out how to do that. Now, will those guys like live up to what they need to do? That there's a difference between were they prepared properly and did they execute properly. But I do think that they'll will be prepared and be ready for this atmosphere.
Did the coaches get the O-line right? I think so. I think the easy decision would have been to default to experience and default to the bigger player at left tackle. I mean, Tosh Baker is 6'8", 325. Anthony Knapp is 6'4", 294 with the updated heights and weight. So he gained 3 pounds since the middle of June. So I do like it. Does that mean that they're going to win those battles? No, but I do think they're putting their best foot forward. I think these guys had to prove, they got the number one reps. They went against the number one defense. So I do think that they got it right. I'm not saying that this is going to be the same five the whole season, but I think on August 31st, this is the right five.
Yeah, I feel like Sunday, whether or not the Notre Dame wins or not, like I think we're still probably going to have some questions about the O-line. I don't think like it's hard for me. I think the least likely scenario is that this O-line goes out and kills it, and you have no second
Yeah.
guesses about these five that were sent out there. So, um, I don't know that we're going to leave the game saying, "Yep, they absolutely nailed it." I mean, we as we've talked about plenty, we understand why they've gone this direction. Um, but I don't know that we're going to see enough on Saturday to be like, okay, no more questions about the offensive line. So I think the and it's hard to say like if the offensive line ends up better later in the season, is that because of they stuck with these guys? There's so much that goes into the progression of the offensive line throughout the season. So I mean, I don't know that we're going to necessarily know for certain whether they got the O line right after the first game.
Okay, the next one, I'm going to take two and put them together. How is the game plan? How well will the coaches make adjustments? And so I think those two go together. And um, my answer to that is I think the game plan is going to be about balance and also working to figure out who A&M is defensively when we're talking about offensive game plan, what they like to do. And then it becomes a chess game with Mike Denbrock. He's got to figure out with Jay Bateman and Mike Elko what they want to do on defense, and he's got some ideas, but you're never really going to know them until you get into a game like this when there's a new coordinator, a new head coach. Once he does that, then it's about getting mismatches with formation, with motion, with personnel groups, and attacking those. The thing is, A&M is really good at playing chess too. Mike Elko is really good, and so he'll be trying to do the same thing. And then on the other side of the ball, Colin Klein versus Al Golden, they'll try to do. But I think the more fascinating matchup will be Notre Dame's offense against A&M's defense. And I think
Yeah,
they'll adjust.
yeah, I think the coaches will make adjustments well. I have confidence in the coordinators there that they will have a good sense of what they need to do. Um, I don't. I think so much of it comes back to the offensive line. Like there's only so many adjustments you can make if you're not blocking well. And so even if they're able to cobble something together in an offense that can score enough points to win the game, will it be an offense that you feel satisfied of, especially coming off of last season where the offense didn't do well against great defenses, and that you're hoping that long term that this is an offense that can overcome good defenses. Uh, so I think the game plan will make sense, um, and be one that tries to utilize the strengths that Notre Dame has and tries to protect from some of the weaknesses that it has. So I'm not really concerned about the coaching staff going into this game. To me, it's more personnel based, which is kind of funny because this whole question is based on the coaching staff. My biggest concern about Notre Dame is the guys that are lining up on the field, especially on the offensive line, rather than the coaches that are telling them what to do.
With your combined powers of seeing the future, predict come Sunday what will you expect to be the best that the coach has accomplished, where the fewest changes will be needed, and the worst that they accomplished, where ND will need the most changes. This is the last part of LDL Go Irish's questions. And so I put those two together as well. I think Notre Dame's secondary is the area where Notre Dame is going to have the least tweaking to do
Yeah.
in terms of going forward. And from where they're going to have the most evolution needed, I think is going to be the passing game. I think there's going to be some discombobulation there, just in part because of Riley Leonard isn't going to have tons of time. And again, he's still adjusting to who can he trust in the passing game to get the ball to, and when is he better at trusting his legs and taking off. And I think that's going to take time to work through.
Yeah, I mean, I think the O-line is the area that you think that maybe there would be the opportunity for changes, but I don't know that you make this decision to throw these young guys out there and then just sort of pull things out from underneath them after one game. So I don't know that there's going to be a lot of changes there. Maybe they have a better sense for what their true abilities and skills are, and what maybe and get more insight into like, okay, this is what we need to sharpen in terms of these players and the communication and stuff like that. So yeah, I do think that like how they'll learn more about like mixing and matching at the wide receiver position, and how to best use those guys in combination, from this game. And then, yeah, I think the secondary, um, I think it's hard, or maybe special teams. Like, I think those are probably areas that you're probably not going to see a lot of changes, um, from Notre Dame coming out of this game. All right, next question, which is not as long, from at Charles W. Wolf. Fill in the blank. Blank is the player who needs to be at his best in order for ND to win on Saturday. Also, if someone falters, over under on offensive line snaps for Bob Morton and Tyler James this weekend.
I think the answer here is obvious. I'm going to say Riley Leonard. I mean, you could say one of the offensive linemen, but they need to really do that collectively. But Riley Leonard is the leader out there. He's the one that's choreographing everything. He's the one that's going to touch the ball the most. He's going to deal with the offensive line's highs and lows. So for me, that was easy. How many reps, if those will Bob Morton and Tyler James get this weekend? 0 on the offensive line, but a whole bunch with me. And this gives me a good chance to promote both of these. After the game on Saturday night, Bob Morton and I are doing a show on YouTube called Into the End Zone. It's ND Zone. So I'm not even sure what to call it, but I know how to spell it. But we are going to have immediate reactions after the game. We'll be live, and we're going to be taking some questions. So it's going to be about a 25-minute show. We'll take share our thoughts, and then we will take some questions live from viewers. Then later on in the night, after 87 cups of coffee, after Tyler and I have finished our stories, and Tyler has done interviews, and we've transcribed all those and have more of insight, we will do our post-game takeaways show. And so you guys probably won't be up to watch that when
it won't be live.
Out.
We won't be doing it live.
We won't be doing it live, but when you get up in the morning and
we'll be waiting for you.
Coffee, you'll be able to see this. So those are the reps those guys will be taking.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, I think the answer is Riley Leonard too. I think anything other than that, I think is probably overthinking it. All right, next question is from Marie Biafore at Biafore_Marie. For Notre Dame to win the game decidedly on Saturday night, which 2 players on offense and which 2 players on defense have to have outstanding games?
Riley Leonard was the easy one here. I thought about picking out an offensive lineman. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go with Jeremiah Love, because if Jeremiah Love has an outstanding game, that means the offensive line to a certain extent did its job. And Mike Denbrock found creative ways to get him the ball. On defense, I'm going to go with Jack Kaiser, because he's really the quarterback of the defense. He's going to get people in the right places in that cauldron of chaos. And I'm going to go with Jordan Botello. Maybe he's more representative of the pass rush than just him, but I think Notre Dame's pass rush is important, so I picked Jordan as the guy to kind of represent that.
Yeah, I went with Leonard for one of my picks on offense. I went with Anthony Knapp as my second one. It's like I think you're right. Like if you picked Jeremiah Love, you probably have to assume that the offensive line played well. But if Anthony Knapp has an outstanding game, like that would be quite the win for Notre Dame, I think. So I went with Knapp. For my defensive guys, I went with the interior lineman. I went with Howard Cross and Riley Mills. If those two guys are playing outstanding and wrecking everything that A&M wants to do up front, it's hard to imagine like the defensive game plan not going excellent. So
Yeah,
I went with those two guys.
I like that too because Notre Dame's area of improvement on defense needs to be run defense. And if they're stopping the run and making A&M one-dimensional, then I think the rest of the game plan takes over. I like your answer better.
All right, next question is from Bob Oxnard on the Insider Lounge. Is Kennedy Urlacher faster than most recruiting analysts expected?
Tyler talks to recruiting analysts way more than I do, so I'm not sure what their expectation was. And I'm not sure about what his speed is because I haven't timed him either. But what I will say is he's kind of pushed his nose into some minor roles already. I mean, he's on the depth chart peripherally at safety. I mean, they list him. So that means he's not a complete afterthought. And I think he's going to be on some special teams. They like his toughness and tackling ability. Again, I'm not sure about his speed, but they like his toughness and they like how quickly he's learned. So they like his speed of learning.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough because you're like, how do I speak for analysts in general? And like you said, we don't really, I guess I don't know for certain what his speed is. I don't have documented times on that. Um, I think the thing that I had questions about, and I think recruiting analysts that I talked to shared similar sentiments, was that when you watch Kennedy Urlacher on film, you see a guy that's coming downhill a lot, and you got to do a lot more than just that to play safety at the college level. And so I think that there were some questions of like, okay, is he a true safety at the next level? Is he someone that needs to play in the box? If he is, he's undersized to do that. So I think those were the questions about Kennedy Urlacher coming out of high school. But yeah, I think he's worked his way into the conversation on to be on the depth chart. I mean, Ben Minnick is someone that he seemingly passed, and everyone was talking about his speed coming out of high school. So I think there's just a lot more to it than speed that makes a safety, and also that makes Urlacher someone that has been able to adapt quickly at Notre Dame. All right, next question is from at Enforcers2117. How would you compare Brandon Joseph to Rod Hurd, especially now since it seems Adon Schuler beat him out?
Well, I think the biggest comparison is that they both came from Northwestern and they both want to be a starting safety at Notre Dame. I think Rod Hurd is the more versatile of those two.
Yep.
He could play corner, he can play nickel, he can play safety. I think Brandon Joseph is the better player. He's in the NFL. He made the Lions roster again. Um, but I think this is about Adon more than it is about Rod. I think had Adon had this kind of camp with Brandon Joseph around, I'm not so sure Adon doesn't win that starting job with Brandon Joseph there. Um, he is really, really an improved player. I don't think Rod Hurd has been a disappointment. But your question was about comparing Hurd to Joseph. Hurd just more versatile, and Joseph, he had an All-America season a couple years before coming to Notre Dame on his resume. So I think he's the guy that has had more accomplishments, certainly during his college career to this point.
Yeah, Joseph is more of a quintessential safety. Like he has the better size, and he's got a couple inches of height on Rod Hurd. Um, Whereas Hurd is a more of a versatile defensive back that Notre Dame was trying to make into a safety. Has played nickelback a lot. I still think he'll get used plenty, but those are the differences to me. Like Brandon Joseph was a true safety, whereas Rod Hurd is a defensive back that Notre Dame's trying to get creative with to use his abilities to help with a few different things in the back end for Notre Dame's defense. All right, next question is from SJB75 on the Inside Line. Obviously, the score could dictate this. Could you see Riley Leonard throwing at least 30 passes Saturday night?
I could see that. I mean, to me, that would represent balance if you're thinking about the plays, offensive play numbers being in the high 60s or low 70s. 30 passes seems reasonable. It'd be the 10th time in his career that he's done that. He's 5-4 in games when he's thrown passes. I think if he gets up into the 40s, that's not a good sign for Notre Dame. But I think 30 is reasonable.
How many times do you think Sam Hartman threw 30 passes for Notre Dame last season?
I'm guessing 4.
3. So yeah, pretty close.
Okay.
I just don't think Notre Dame would have to be trailing and not having any success running the ball for that to happen. So could it happen? Sure. Like a lot of things can happen in a football game, but I think it's unlikely, especially if it's a game that Notre Dame wins. I don't think that Notre Dame will have Riley Leonard throw 30 or more passes. And there could be, and I think part of what's built into that, there will be dropbacks where Riley Leonard is supposed to pass, but he sees a running opportunity and takes advantage of that. And so I think that lowers his passing attempts down too as well.
I think the fascinating one, Tyler, might be too, how many times does he run the ball?
Right. Yeah. I think that'll be it'd be interesting to see. And what's
Do you know what his career high is in carries?
In terms of carries?
I know it off the top of my head. Just because I looked it up yesterday.
Like 15?
18.
18.
And it was against Notre Dame.
I was gonna say it might have been the Notre Dame game, but I hadn't researched it. All right, our next question is from @MikeDevoy1. Hi, Eric and Tyler. Hope you're staying cool in the heat. Anthony Knapp was originally seen as a guard, at least by some. Can you describe what traits physically / athletically separates guards from tackles?
I'll probably be a little bit overly simplistic here just to boil this down. Tackles tend to have more length, longer arms, usually taller, more athletic. They can operate on an island. Interior guys, sometimes the advantage they have is they have better bend. For example, Tosh Baker got a look inside earlier in his career and was not a fit there. Others have been, Alex Bars, Quentin Nelson, Tommy Kramer, Nick Martin. Those guys all were tackles that moved inside, high school tackles. And even in the pros, Zach Martin went from tackle to guard. But again, usually, what Anthony Knapp doesn't have is the height. He's 6'4". What he does have is the long arms, and he does have big hands and good punch, and he's athletic.
Yeah, you nailed most of it there. The guards tend to have more brute strength, and I mean, think about the guys that they're trying to get out of the way on the interior of the defensive line. Those are usually the really stout guys. So at guard, you have to be able to root those players out, play with incredible leverage and strength to be able to get some movement with those interior defensive linemen. Whereas the tackles have to have quick feet and maybe change directions more fluidly on the edge. So those are the biggest things. There obviously are things that translate in either direction. I mean, Zach Martin was an incredible offensive tackle at Notre Dame and has become a really, 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 really good one in the really, really good guard at the NFL level. So and I mean, Quentin Nelson probably could have played offensive tackle at the college level, but he was a really good guard and continued to do that in the NFL as well. All right, next question is from Carts by Bubbles on the Insider Lounge. New subscriber, first-time question submitter. Could you build a 2-deep depth chart at each position using both Notre Dame and Texas A&M rosters? Curious how many players for A&M would start at Notre Dame. And
I'm gonna let you handle that, Tyler.
Yeah, I took the lead here.
We would need another hour for both of us to do that, and you're smarter.
Carts, I didn't do a 2-deep. I just did starters to get to the sort of the second half, and I didn't include special teams guys, but I did do offense and defense. So here's a quick run through of what I'm looking at now. You have to remember we know way more about Notre Dame's guys than we know about A&M's guys, so this is obviously a bit biased just because of our knowledge base. On offense, I went with Riley Leonard at quarterback. I think there's a strong argument between the quarterbacks there. I think there's a lot of people that like Connor Wigman a lot too. But I went with Leonard. At running back, I went with Jeremiah Love. The receivers, you would think like because it's a question mark for Notre Dame that maybe you would have more A&M guys, but I went with Notre Dame. I went with field receiver Chris Mitchell, slot receiver Jaden Greathouse, and then boundary receiver I went with Noah Thomas from A&M. The offensive line is more A&M heavy with left tackle Trey Zune and left guard Chase Pasantis. I thought those were pretty easy decisions from my standpoint. I went with Ashton Craig from Notre Dame at center. I'm not exactly sure who A&M's going to start at center. Fa'ua, I'm sure I'm butchering the name. The transfer from Utah could be A&M starter, and I think he would be a good choice as well. Right guard, Billy Schrouth from Notre Dame. Right tackle, I think, is a bit of a coin flip. I went with A&M's Demetrius Crownover, and I'm not even sure for certain who's starting uh, for A&M at right tackle. A&M's got some movement or some like question marks on its offensive line in terms of who's going to start where, but they do have more experience and more size than Notre Dame does. The only one I haven't mentioned on offense so far is tight end, and I went with Mitchell Evans. So that was a 7-4 Notre Dame advantage on the offensive side. And the way it turned out, I believe, if I counted these correctly, I went 7-4 Notre Dame's advantage on the defensive side. The A&M guys I went with were Nick Scorton at defensive end, and the other defensive end, Shamar Stewart. I like what A&M has at defensive end there. The interior guys I went with Notre Dame's Riley Mills and Howard Cross. Split. I went with the nickelback defense because it just feels more realistic to modern college football than throwing three linebackers out there. Although I guess I could have done three linebackers and done 12 defensive players. So I split the linebackers between A&M's Torin York and Notre Dame's Jack Kaiser. Nickelback, I went with Jordan Clark from Notre Dame. I think you're sort of splitting hairs there between maybe Jordan Clark and Jadon Hill from Florida, who I think is A&M's potential starter at nickelback, although I believe he will have to miss the first half because of a targeting penalty from last season. Rest of the secondary is mostly Notre Dame guys, Benjamin Morrison and Christian Gray as the corners, Xavier Watts at safety, and then Bryce Anderson from A&M as the other safety. So when you put it on paper like that, that makes it seem like there's a talent advantage for Notre Dame. I think there is in some ways, but perhaps maybe the biggest hole is Notre Dame's offensive line versus A&M's defensive line, and that's gonna, I think, play a large role in the outcome of the game.
But I also think that the side of the game people aren't talking about is how good Notre Dame's defense is. I'm going to be really surprised if they don't do a really good job.
Yeah, and I was curious like what those numbers would look like when you do the defense, because I do like Notre Dame's defense a lot. I think A&M's gonna have a really good defense, and some of it's hard because more especially defensively for A&M are transfers, whereas Notre Dame has more returning guys that you have a sense for what they're going to be defensively, and obviously us as Notre Dame reporters have a better sense of what that's going to be versus we haven't seen these transfers from A&M in practices. All right, another question from El Diogo Irish on the Insider Lounge. Will this be the last year of the 12th man at Texas A&M? They used to man the kickoff teams with walk-ons. Since next year there will be no walk-ons, how will that work? Not a fan of A&M, but thought this was a nice college tradition. Should be a great college football atmosphere for this game.
Okay, I'm going to meander with my answer here. So what I think it is going to be the last year is Carter Carls being on the beat at Texas A&M. So last night, Mike Elko had his radio show at a barbecue joint, and during one of the commercials, he's shaking hands with everybody. He goes to shake Carter's hand, and Carter says, "I can't shake your hand. I have barbecue sauce on it." Okay, so as far as the walk-ons, I'm not sure that we yet understand how all this looks. I was talking to somebody about this last night that had a really good feel for this. And what they told me is that, it's going to be harder to draw that line, but not everybody, like, for example, from campus to campus, not everybody's going to fully fund 105 scholarships. There will be some, you know, FBS teams that don't fully fund those, that still have, that they're more closer to walk-ons than they are scholarship players. It, and again, the way that teams directly pay, that's not going to be even either. So there's going to be maybe some tiering in terms of, you know, who's well paid and who's not well paid. So I guess conceptually they could still pull this off, but I'm really more concerned about the crazy swing that Texas A&M does than the 12th man thing. I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, I had
Did I
muted
throw you there, Tyler?
No, I had muted myself and I hadn't unmuted myself, so that accounted for the delay
I
there.
thought maybe you just were stunned by the completeness of that answer.
Yeah, the depth.
Carter was a guest on our podcast last week, and so his barbecue sauce hands I thought were relevant.
Yeah, and maybe you should have asked Carter what he knows about this, because I mean, again, this isn't our area of expertise. I'm sure they'll carry it on in some way. I don't know how. Like, you would imagine that A&M's going to have a fully scholarship roster if that's available to them. It's not like they're hurting for money down in College Station.
I think they should pick somebody out of the stands. That would really be the 12th man.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's funny because if you think, or I guess the way I think about walk-ons, like the traditional walk-ons aren't what most walk-ons are today, right? I mean, most of these walk-ons have been recruited, whereas walk-ons in the past were just guys that were students on campus that came out and walked onto the team. And then and I mean, not like they weren't working their butts off, but they weren't like recruited to come to Notre Dame specifically to be on the football team. Whereas any more like more these days, you got guys. I mean, Notre Dame's recruiting walk-on transfers even. So it's a lot different. So I guess you could still have, in theory, if you're those schools that maybe aren't recruiting 105 scholarship guys, you could have still players that come onto your team from your student body. I would imagine like programs at like Notre Dame and Texas A&M, that's not going to happen much at. So I mean, it's a whole new world where we don't know exactly what it's going to look like. I mean, there's no guarantee for sure that this is happening next year. Like, this is what's in the House settlement and all those. There's still things that have to be worked out. And with the way that government and the NCAA have been working hand in hand and not hand in hand, like, who knows when things will happen anymore. So we're all just, you get wait and see what any of this is going to look like and when it'll look like that. All right. Next one is from Marie Biafore at Biafore_Marie. If Notre Dame loses the game on Saturday night, how much do you think it will drop their chances of making the playoffs? Can each of you give a percentage chance of them making the playoffs if they win the game versus if they lose the game?
Well, Marie, I think margin matters here. I also think the veracity of ND's remaining schedule matters in doing this calculus. So if ND loses a close game, the objective becomes proving that they are not that team in November, that they're a different team in November than they were on August 31st, and that August 31st is irrelevant. What we don't know is whether the schedule will offer them that opportunity. If Florida State is not a top 25 team or maybe even a top 10 team, and if USC struggles in the new Big Ten, will they have the opportunity to show that they're a different team? The other part of this is if they lose like Michigan 2019 style big, they'll have a hard time ever climbing over Texas A&M. That's what happened in 2019. They lost badly to Michigan. Michigan didn't really close out the season in style, and Notre Dame was kind of pinned below them in the rankings, even though Notre Dame played better down the stretch. So if they win, they can probably lose one game the rest of the way given their schedule. And if they lose a close game, they may have to run the table. But this doesn't happen in a vacuum. You know, you have to take into account what other teams are doing. But I think if Notre Dame goes 11-1, no matter what the loss is, I think they're in I think that's one thing that's safe to say.
So do you have percentages for us?
I don't, because of what I just said with the margin of victory. And I mean, Florida State losing, I mean, if Georgia Tech isn't the ACC champ, that becomes a big deal. Notre Dame needs Florida State and USC to look like formidable opponents in November when other teams are going to be playing formidable opponents and competing with Notre Dame for seeding.
Yeah, I came up with numbers that have no mathematical
Good, thank
basis.
God.
They have no mathematical basis.
Marie just pokes at me because she knows I'm not good at math.
Yeah, well, I don't know that there's any math to support the numbers that I have. It reminds me when I was hanging stuff on the wall in my apartment with my girlfriend this summer, and I was measuring things, and she was like, I just measure with my heart. So these percentages are coming from the heart rather than any math. So I say if Notre Dame wins, they have an 80%, 85% chance of making the playoff, and if they lose, they have a 70% chance. So they'll decrease their odds by 15% in the unofficial Tyler James made up numbers index. All right, our last question is from Frank Sarah at Frank SE bunch of numbers. How is Rubio rehab going?
Not far enough along that he's even on the depth chart, and he's even been asked about when he originally got hurt on the first day of training camp, which was July 31st. The thought was end of September, early October, even though that wasn't officially stated. That was kind of the whispers. And so I think as we get into September, we may get a better feel for how that timetable is going. But I mean, he certainly isn't going to play Saturday night.
Yeah, I don't have a firm answer on this. It's something that we should probably ask Marcus Freeman about at some point here soon. And depends on how many other questions we have about other topics that are more pertinent to the games that are going on before we probably get more of a firm answer on that.
I think we should ask him more about the swimming program.
All right, that's it for today's episode of the Inside ND Sports Podcast. If you don't already, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other popular podcast platforms. If you like what you hear, give us a star rating, leave a review, and share our podcast feed with someone who will be watching Saturday night's game. As I mentioned earlier, we're offering a 30-day free trial of InsideNDSports.com to our podcast listeners who want to try out a subscription to the site. Just use promo code NDPOD when you sign up for a subscription. You can also find a link to the deal in the podcast description or show notes. You're going to want to be locked into our YouTube channel this weekend. So make sure you're subscribed over there too. We're trying to hit 3,000 subscribers by kickoff, and we're less than 150 away. So we'll have place your bets with our Texas A&M predictions coming on Friday. As Eric mentioned, a post-game show right after the game live with Eric and Bob Morton. And then Eric and I will share our post-game takeaways in another video after that. And as always, we have plenty of written content to get you ready for the game. So stick with InsideNDSports.com for all your Notre Dame football coverage needs.